Hello, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm servicing and fixing a few minor problems on this Countax C300H lawn tractor. So it hasn't been serviced for quite a while, not quite clear when it was last serviced, so it's going to have a full service. Going to obviously go through the engine. I'm probably going to take the deck off, clean it, check the blades, sharpen the blades, grease all the pivot points, do the tyre pressures, check the battery, all that type of thing. I've started it briefly, so I checked the oil first, started it. It started fine on last year's petrol, which is a good endorsement in itself. I did that just to warm the oil up a little bit so that it drains better. So I'm going to get that draining, and then we can go round and do the rest of the service bits. This is a Briggs and Stratton single cylinder engine. So as well as the service, I mentioned a few problems that needed fixing. The first is that's where the steering wheel needs to be to make the tractor go straight. The wheels aren't tracking straight, they're out like that, so the steering needs a bit of attention. The owner's also reported that it doesn't cut evenly from side to side, so we're going to try and level the deck. After I've put it back on, I'll try and level it, and there's various schemes in the owner's manual to help us through that. So the next problem, the final one really, is the grass collector, which has a series of combs that rotate and pick up the grass, and some of those have broken. The owner actually has a spare grass collector, so I'm going to be taking this one off, putting the new one on which has all its combs intact, and then that will give us a bit more time. At our leisure we can fix the one that's lost the combs. I'm actually going to put this on charge now because when I started it, it only just started. So I can tell the battery needs a charge, and I'm not surprised. So we'll get it charging while we're doing the rest of the work. So I'm using my trusty C-Tech battery charger. If your battery isn't the sealed type and it's actually got ports where you can top up the electrolyte, then do that before you start. This battery charger has a recondition mode, so I'm going to put it on motorcycle. It's not an AGM battery, so it's on motorcycle because it's a relatively small battery, somewhere in between the two, and recondition, and off it goes. Okay, the oil drain for these is a kind of a bayonet setup, which depending on your perspective is either convenient or unnecessarily complicated. The service kit for these mowers did come with a little tube that you're supposed to put on there, but that's long since gone, so I've got a habit of harvesting useful pieces of tube. This one actually came off an old washing machine that was being thrown away, and a happy coincidence, it fits just right on there, and it's going to be able to take the oil over the running board and hopefully drip into this pan without too much mess. But I say hopefully, let's see how we get on. I'm just going to blow some of these pine needles out of the way first. Okay, so the tube is on. I'm going to make use of this clip that I also harvested. That's better. Turn the steering so we've got some space. Now turn the bayonet like that, and then pull out, and that should, he says, okay, well, you can probably tell we're going to be here for some time. I'm not going to video 2 hours of oil draining, but I'll come back when it's drained. Right, while the oil is draining, let's turn our attention to something else. Let's start with the air filter maybe. The service schedule for these mowers is kind of varies on the severity of use. So there's a 25-hour oil change interval in severe conditions, 50 hours if not, and then same for the air cleaner. There's cleaning at 50, I think, and then replace at 100. But it also says or every season. Because I don't know when this was last serviced, and it was at least more than one season ago, I've actually chosen just to replace the air cleaner and also the pre-cleaner. and yeah, probably for the best. The sponge is starting to disintegrate, it's torn. That air cleaner doesn't look terrible actually, but yeah, we're going to change that. Although what I am going to do, because it's quite windy today, is just put that one back on while I go and get the new one. Okay, so one new air cleaner and pre-filter. I'm using Briggs and Stratton genuine parts. I'll put the part numbers in the description and stuff. Before I fit those, I'm just going to blow out some of the debris that was in the air cleaner housing. And to make sure that nothing goes into the carburettor, we're going to put a rag in there. Just trying to make sure that all of the air filter element underneath is covered by this sponge bit. It's not a particularly great fit, but I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to leave that cover off for now because it has cleared a bit more space for me to access the fuel filter. Alright, next we'll do the spark plug. So the plug is the Champion RC12YC. That plug doesn't look too bad actually, but again, because I don't know when this was last serviced, I got a new one. The gap is 0.76 millimeters, which probably equates to something more sensible in inches. I've put some fresh engine oil on the threads. You can tell that didn't happen with this one, which is why it was a bit stiff to get in and out. So I've already set the gap, so we can just whack this one straight back in. So the seat's tight there, so that's a quarter. And then half a turn. While you're here, check the exhaust. Look underneath as well for any signs that it's been blowing. So the heat shield's seen better days, but the exhaust looks absolutely fine itself. I'm going to take this side panel off because it'll be easier for accessing the oil filter and the fuel filter. You could probably get away without, but for me it's going to be just easier to do it. So because I've done that, I can actually just fit this cover back on now, because it's not really helping to have it loose. The oil's still draining, so I'm looking at the fuel filter instead. Now, I was surprised to see this fuel filter. I didn't have the opportunity to check this mower over before I ordered the parts. My understanding is that that is the correct fuel filter for a single cylinder Briggs and Stratton engine. I was a bit worried to see this one, because I was worried if there was enough slack in the pipe, but actually there is. If anything, there's probably too much slack, so we are going to be okay to go ahead and swap the fuel filter back to the one that it's supposed to be. So let's turn the fuel off and get some rags. So always a little frisson of excitement here when we find out if the fuel tap actually works or not, or if we're just going to get fuel coming out everywhere. Oh, and a little bit of hail, which is very fitting for a lawnmower video, isn't it? Anyway, we'll carry on. It appears the fuel tap does work. So I was just trying to look up the direction of flow. These filters aren't actually marked with the direction of flow, unless I'm completely missing it, but according to the Countax manual, which I must say is very good, that goes that way. Don't know if you saw the little bits of debris that came out of the filter there when I tapped it. There you go. So I know this is a dirty rag, but all of that was in this filter, so that did need doing. While you're here, have a good look at the fuel line. And I've also spotted, I don't know whether you can see that down in there, there's just a little bit of chaff around the steering gear, so that's not going to help. Also not particularly great to have all that chaff around the starter solenoid either, so at some point, might do it after I've sealed the oil system back up. Actually, we'll get rid of all of that. Should have done that before we started, but hey ho. Right, the oil has stopped dripping. Just about. Now I turn my attention to the oil filter. This doesn't need doing every oil change, but again, as I've said several times now, because I don't know when this was last serviced, we're doing the whole thing. I've got a range of oil filter removal tools. This is the one that I always come back to. It's generally proved to be the most helpful. It grips like that. And of course I've set it up the wrong way around. There we go. So on there like that. And then it loosens it. There doesn't really seem to be any way of getting a drip pan under here, so I've kind of just taken the view that I'll have to go for it. Okay, one sacrificial rag, not too bad. I'll get another one. Quite keen not to have this off for too long because it's quite a blowy day. So a quick smear of fresh engine oil on the seal and back on. I was about to say I don't ever bother torquing these up, I only ever do them by hand, and look, it even says on the filter hand tighten only. So there we go. So while we're here, good idea to just have a general look round at the electrical connections. I just spotted this. This is loose, which is not going to make for the best starting performance. Also the protective boot is up here. It ain't really protecting much up there. I'm pretty sure that should be over there. So because it's connected directly to the battery live. So what I'm going to do now is disconnect the battery, which will enable me to safely tighten that up. Other side wasn't too bad. Right, the oil has pretty much finished draining, so it's a case of pushing this back in, twisting it round to the lock position. That's now caused a whole load more oil to drain out. Just what was in the tube. So in view of what I found on the other side with the loose connection, I've just been going around checking these. This one's fine. That wire is oily, but it looks okay. It's time to top the oil up. So a clean jug. Cleaned all around the dipstick and filler nozzle. I'm going to put that inside the garage while I'm pouring because it's windy and I don't want any more stuff to blow on it. I'm using a fully synthetic 5W30. The manual says it takes 1.4 litres, so I'm going to put 1.2 in and then we'll have a look on the dipstick after that. Just check that's done up before we do, so we don't have the embarrassment of pouring new engine oil on the floor. Okay, so that's drained in, we'll just see where we're at. Check the oil level with the dipstick screwed in. That's actually on the fill line at 1.2, but we've changed the filter, so that's probably going to go down a bit when we start it. But I think what I'll probably do now is try and get rid of as much of this chaff that's loitering around in here as I can, then start it up. Then we'll check the oil level and see how we're doing. Okay, the engine's been stopped for a good 10-20 minutes now, so let's just see what the oil level's like. Now we've run it through the new filter. About halfway down the dipstick now. So I'm just going to put probably 100 mils in and see how we get on. That looks spot on to me. That's up to the full mark, so we're done with the oil change. So while this cover's open, I'm going to start greasing the steering linkages. You can't see very well, I imagine. I've got my torch on there as bright as I can. Essentially, I've blown all the pine needles out, but there's a whole load of old grease on that steering cog, which looks alright, but is covered in stuff. So it's just a question of cleaning as best we can and then re-greasing. The reason I'm turning it this way is because there is a grease nipple on that steering shaft. Just work that in. And now I'm going to use an old paintbrush to apply some grease to that steering gear. Okay, so I know that's not absolutely ideal. I would like to take it off, strip it completely, clean it properly, but there is a limit to what we can do in the time available. A bit more hail. Right, I think I found the problem with the steering. Just watch this. Now I know it's not a precision piece of racing engineering, but that doesn't look quite right to me. Let's compare to the other side. Nothing at all in terms of the same sort of movement there. So I think that needs some attention. That means that I'm not going to bother setting the wheel alignment today because it's pointless when there's that much play in the system. That could also explain why it doesn't cut straight, so I'm also probably not going to do the deck levelling today until I've fixed that. So we'll take the deck off and clean it, but probably put it back on and not level it until I've fixed that, because it's kind of a pointless exercise really. What I am going to do is just apply a small amount of grease to these steering joints. Okay, so a slight change in location for this bit. I'm just going to check the wheel bearings now, and for that we need to jack the tractor up, which is why I've moved it. Hiya. So with it jacked up, just feeling for play in the bearings, listening for noise as well. They sound great. We can also feel for play in the steering bearings, and they feel good on this side as well. So obviously do the same on the other side. Okay, so same thing for the back wheels. Again, I'm just showing you one of these, and you obviously do the same on both sides. This is jacked up under the transmission. This transmission unit is supposedly sealed for life. I'm not quite sure whether I buy that whenever I see it, but to be honest, the hassle of opening it up, changing the oil is quite substantial, so I am going to leave it well alone. So here it's just a case again of rocking the wheels. There's a tiny bit of play. I wouldn't say that's enough to be too concerned about, certainly not really enough to be doing a great deal about. While we're under here, we can have a look at the drive belts as well. So there's a belt going from engine to transmission for the drive, and then there's another belt that's on that same vertical pulley that does the power takeoff. And they look okay, slight bit of sort of perishing wear around the edges, but nothing too major, so I think they're going to be okay to carry on with for now. So obviously we're going to do the same on the other side, and then that's us done in terms of checking the bearings on the front and rear wheels. Okay, so the battery's been off the charger for a while now. I'm just interested in seeing what the voltage is. 12.77, that's pretty good. So what I'm going to look at now is just the cranking voltage, and then whether the voltage increases when it's running, and just to give me an idea of whether it's charging or not. So that looks absolutely fine. It went down to just under 10 when it was cranking, which isn't ideal, but it's also probably a reflection of the fact that the battery hasn't really been used much. The resting voltage of that is absolutely spot on, and the voltage when it's running, I don't know whether you noticed, but I put the headlights on and it was still charging in the right sort of voltage, so 13.5-ish. So that's really good. Now we move our attention to the tyre pressures. So there's a range of pressures specified, but for maximum grip they say we want 10 at the back and 12 at the front. Right, time to take the deck off and have a look at the condition of the blades and get all the grass and clag out of that. So there's a tensioning lever just here, and as you can see that's the drive direction, although the belt, to be quite honest, is far too slack in the tensioned position. And then that is the loosened position, which allows it to be even looser. I'm going to lower the deck down. You can probably tell, although you might not be able to see right underneath, that's made the belt really slack. And then I can just slip it off the pulley. It's not going to come off this side without me taking the covers off, but that's loose enough for what we need to do. And then there's these pins underneath. And these clips have a lock position, which is like that, and an open position, which is like that. Right, I've moved this around the other side now. Just take the rest of these deck pins off. I think the rear ones are shorter than the front ones. Different sorts there. And helpfully someone appears to have put this back without actually bothering to put one of the locking pins in at all. We'll see if we can find a spare. There we go, just slide it out on its anti-scalping wheels. Check the condition of the belt as we go. That looks alright. So lovely, a nice bit of mould, plenty of grass. Doesn't look too bad condition wise though, not really much in the way of rust and stuff, so I'm going to find a suitable scraping tool. I must say the blades look to be in pretty good condition. I will just put a fresh edge on them, but they do look pretty good. So let's scrape the grass off. I'll do that away from the tractor I think, and we'll go from there. Okay, the deck's a lot cleaner now, and we have a large pile of dried grass on the floor. Ideally this deck would have a bit more of a thorough clean with a wire brush and then some rust treatment. I've not got that today, but certainly something I think we'll be doing in the future. For now, I'm going to take the blades off and give them a sharpen. Do these one at a time so I don't forget where to go. So these blades, if you can see, not too bad actually, just one gouge there, one gouge there. So I'm just going to give them a bit of a tickle up with a flap disc in an angle grinder. Here we go, angle grinder, flap disc. This is quite a worn out one, but it still works just fine. Don't know how well you can see, it's quite a gouge on that blade just there. The amount of material I'm going to have to take off the whole blade to get rid of that, I feel, isn't going to be worthwhile. So we're going to leave that, flatten the other side, do the best we can with it, but we're just going to tolerate that that's there. I know that best practice when it's like that would be just to whack a new blade on. I don't have a new blade, so we're going to do what we can with what we've got. So that isn't particularly pretty, but barring that gouge, it is actually pretty sharp. So I've got another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those to do, and I will see you after. Okay, so the deck's clean, the blades are as sharpened as I thought was necessary. Countax advised that you never sharpen the blades in the manual. They say if there's any nicks in them you should just buy new ones. I know what they're saying, but I think we've managed to get a bit more life out of these before going and buying some new ones. They don't give a torque setting for these blade bolts, so I've just done them as tight as I could get them with my small 3/8 breaker bar. This one's staked, it's a different attachment presumably because these two go forwards, they turn right, that one turns left, so the bolt would undo unless it had a left hand thread, so I think that's why the difference is there. So going to put the deck back on now. Before I put the deck back on, I'm going to have a quick look at the deck drive belt. That all looks fine. I'm not going to take this entire cover off because that involves taking the pulley off and everything else, but I can see enough to see that the belt looks to be in good condition. So I don't know if you can tell from the video camera, these brackets are in line, these are splayed outwards, which might explain why the cutter's not quite running level, because it might be binding up, so I'm just going to encourage those. Clean their corresponding parts underneath as well. So I've got the deck back on, the belt's back on, and I've tensioned it using the lever under there. I now have my travel suitcase weighing scale, which is the only spring balance I can find, but it'll do the job. It's quite accurate because I've checked it before. Now I'm just going to put it in the midpoint of the belt. The deck's height setting is on the middle setting. And then I'm going to line up my ruler. Now, because of the way the scale is, I'm going to have to hold it still on 10 or 100 millimeters and then pull with 2 kilos of force, and that belt is deflecting to about 12 millimeters. The book says 13, but I'm pretty happy with 12. Okay, there we go. We've serviced this Countax C300H lawn tractor. We've done a full engine service, taken the deck off, cleaned it, sharpened the blades, greased the deck pivot points. I did more than I showed you underneath in terms of covering them all. Also greased the steering system, checked the battery, checked the belt tension, the main belt going from the engine to drive the deck, and also the tension of the belt within the deck, turning all three blades. We found a bit of a problem with the steering, which I haven't been able to fix today because that's going to need some new parts. Basically we've got metal on metal contact and everything's rubbing against each other, and no wonder the steering is quite hard to turn actually because of that. We also tried to swap over the grass collector with another one that the owner had that has got combs in better condition, but unfortunately that was from an earlier model and that didn't quite fit. So I'll do another video about changing the combs on the grass collector when I've ordered them. Anyway, hope it helps if you've got one of these and you want to service it, to look after it and work on it yourself. If you'd like this sort of thing, please consider subscribing so you'll get to hear about more videos like this as I publish them. For now, happy mowing and thanks for watching. Bye.